DC Comics had it all: iconic heroes, loyal fans, and decades of success. But one by one, they started burning it all down. They erased entire timelines, replaced beloved heroes overnight, and made choices so bad, fans still haven't forgiven them. These weren't creative risks. They were decisions that backfired, costing DC respect, money, and millions of readers. So, what were DC's blunders? And which decisions hurt the fans the most? Here are the top 10 DC's biggest blunders. At number 10, Wonder Woman's mod era. In 1968, DC made a decision that almost destroyed Wonder Woman's legacy. Under writer Denny O'Neil, Diana Prince was stripped of her Amazon powers and iconic costume, turned into a fashionable boutique owner and martial artist, guided by a mentor named I Ching. The idea was to modernize her for a new audience, but it backfired. Without her superpowers, Wonder Woman no longer stood as the world's foremost superheroine. Stories often had her relying on male characters, and her symbolism as a feminist icon was shattered. Feminists like Gloria Steinem publicly condemned the change, arguing that the only major female hero shouldn't be reduced to an ordinary adventurer. Sales dropped, fan backlash grew, and even O'Neil later admitted it was one of his greatest mistakes. By 1973, DC reversed course, restoring her powers, her costume, and her status. What was meant to strengthen Diana only weakened her image, and DC had to publicly undo the damage. At number 9, Powergirls' Atlantean origin. Powergirl was once the proud cousin of Earth-2's Superman, a symbol of Kryptonian legacy. But after Crisis on Infinite Earths, Earth-2 was erased, and DC declared Superman the sole surviving Kryptonian. That left Powergirl with no past. In 1987, they forced a new origin on her, claiming she wasn't Kryptonian at all, but the granddaughter of an ancient Atlantean sorcerer named Arian. Fans were baffled. This new backstory felt clumsy and disconnected, severing her emotional ties to Superman. Worse, Powergirl still had Kryptonian-like powers, making the Atlantean explanation feel hollow. Writers often ignored or contradicted it, and for nearly 2 decades, she became one of DC's most confusing heroes. Finally, during Infinite Crisis, DC admitted the mistake. The Atlantean origin was discarded, and her true Earth-2 Kryptonian heritage was restored. What was meant as a quick fix only deepened the confusion, leaving Powergirl in a lost identity crisis that took 20 years to repair. At number 8, Crisis on Infinite Earths. Crisis on Infinite Earths was meant to save DC's continuity. In 1985, it merged all parallel Earths into a single universe, erasing decades of Tangled history. At first, it felt like a bold solution, but the cure created new problems. Without the multiverse, characters like Hawkman and Donna became continuity disasters, and the legion of superheroes was thrown into chaos. Beloved worlds like Earth-2 and Earth-S vanished, and fans mourned the loss of the rich tapestry of alternate histories. Writers struggled under the limits of a single universe, unable to explore the what-if possibilities that made DC special. Over time, DC realized the mistake. Hypertime brought glimpses of parallel worlds back. Infinite Crisis restored 52 Earths. And finally, Convergence completely reversed the original outcome, explicitly bringing back every lost Earth. By undoing the death of the multiverse, DC admitted that erasing infinite worlds had weakened their stories. Complexity wasn't the problem, it was their greatest strength. But DC's real damage came next, when they rewrote origins, erased identities, and broke fans' hearts, starting with Wonder Girl herself. At number 7, Donna Troy's Tangled origins. Donna Troy, the original Wonder Girl, became the victim of endless editorial mistakes. Before Crisis on Infinite Earths, her story was simple. Wonder Woman's younger adopted sister, rescued from a fire and raised on Paradise Island. But after Crisis rebooted Wonder Woman as a newcomer to the world, that origin no longer worked. In 1988, DC retconned her history in Who is Wonder Girl, making her a child saved by the Titan goddess Rhea and raised among magical Titan seeds. It was complex and stripped away her family bond with Diana. Fans were confused, and it didn't last. In the 1990s, John Byrne rewrote her again, introducing Dark Angel, an enemy who cursed Donna to live multiple lives. By 2005, the return of Donna Troy tried to merge every version, revealing Dark Angel as an alternate Donna. Despite all these fixes, her past stayed messy. DC writers openly call it the Donna Troy problem, a symbol of how one mistake spiraled into decades of retcons. At number 6, Batman War Games. In War Games 2004, Stephanie Brown, spoiler, and briefly the first female Robin, was fired by Batman. She was desperate to prove herself, and her plan was to stop Gotham's gangs. However, it spiraled out of control. Captured by Black Mask, she was brutally tortured and left to die. Despite Batman's efforts, Stephanie succumbed to her injuries, or so it seemed. Fans were outraged. Her death felt needless. Another young female hero fridged for shock value. The anger grew when DC refused to honor her legacy. Her memorial was missing from the Batcave, and an editor infamously dismissed her with, "She was never really Robin." The backlash was relentless. Fans launched campaigns, flooded DC with letters, and even sent batarangs demanding justice. Under pressure, DC reversed course. In 2008, it was revealed her death had been faked by Dr. Leslie Tompkins. Stephanie returned, reclaiming her place in the Bat family and later becoming Batgirl. Fan outrage led DC to admit a mistake from a grim plot twist. At number 5, Wally West's Fall. Heroes in Crisis was meant to explore trauma, but it ended up breaking one of DC's most beloved heroes. Wally West, the hopeful legacy Flash fans had just welcomed back in Rebirth, was revealed as the accidental killer of his friends. In a burst of uncontrolled Speed Force energy, he killed a dozen heroes at Sanctuary, then covered it up in guilt before confessing. Fans were horrified. Wally, the heart of the Flash family, turned into a murderer, even unintentionally, felt like a cruel betrayal. Backlash was swift and loud, with readers flooding social media and demanding justice for Wally. DC scrambled to undo the damage. Within a year, Flash Forward put Wally on a redemption path. Then the Flash issue 761 revealed Reverse Flash had manipulated his breakdown. Finally, later stories like Infinite Frontier and Flash Annual Issue 1 shifted the Sanctuary massacre. Even writers admitted the story didn't work out. In the end, they restored Wally as a hero, proving this was one blunder fans refused to accept. At number 4, Hal Jordan becomes Parallax. In Emerald Twilight 1994, DC made a shocking move that shattered Green Lantern fans. After Coast City was destroyed, Hal Jordan, once the proud hero of the Corps, was consumed by grief. He flew to OA, slaughtered fellow Lanterns, and absorbed the central power battery, becoming the villain Parallax. The twist was meant to clear the way for a new hero, Kyle Rayner, but it came at the cost of Hal's legacy. Fans were outraged. A beloved Silver Age icon was turned into a mass murderer, a cheap way to replace him with a younger character. Fan protests erupted, demanding justice for Hal. DC doubled down for years, even making Parallax the villain of Zero Hour. But the backlash never faded. Finally, Green Lantern Rebirth, 2004, redeemed Hal, revealing he'd been possessed by a cosmic fear entity. This retcon admitted the fall of Hal Jordan was a mistake. In the end, DC had to bring him back to the light to heal the damage. But DC's biggest stumbles were still ahead, removing fan favorites, gutting legacy, and turning one hero's origin into a complete timeline disaster. At number 3, Wally West's removal. When DC rebooted its universe with Flashpoint and the New 52, it erased one of its most beloved heroes, Wally West. For over 2 decades, Wally had been the heart of the Flash legacy, carrying the mantle after Barry Allen's death. But in the new continuity, he simply didn't exist. Fans were devastated. A hero who represented growth, family, and legacy was wiped away, and in his place came a new, unrelated Wallace West. Over 25 years of stories and emotional connections were gone, leaving readers feeling betrayed. The outcry was relentless, with campaigns demanding Wally's return as the true fastest man alive. DC eventually admitted the mistake. In DC Universe Rebirth 2016, Wally fought his way back into reality, memories intact, symbolizing the return of hope and legacy to the DC Universe. Even Jeff Johns' confirmed fan love for the original Wally drove his revival. Erasing Wally showed DC what couldn't be replaced, and bringing him back was their loudest apology. At number 2, the New 52 reboot. In 2011, DC rebooted its entire line with The New 52, aiming to modernize characters and attract new readers. Every hero was reimagined for a new generation. At first, sales soared, but the cost was devastating. decades of legacy and history vanished. Marriages like Superman and Lois were erased, the Justice Society disappeared, and a messy 5-year timeline left characters' pasts fractured and unclear. Fans soon felt disconnected. The heart of the DC universe, its rich sense of history, family, and growth, was gone. Creators themselves struggled with shifting editorial mandates, and the promise of a bold new era faded into confusion. By 2016, DC admitted it had gone too far. Rebirth brought back the hope and legacy fans demanded, even revealing in-story that 10 years of history had been stolen. Jeff Johns called it a mission to restore everything that made DC matter. Piece by piece, Rebirth, Doomsday Clock, and Death Metal undid the damage. The New 52 proved that without legacy, DC's heroes lose their soul. At number 1, Hawkmans PostCrisis. After Crisis on Infinite Earths merged DC's multiverse, Hawkman became the hero DC just couldn't get right. The Golden Age Carter Hall and the Silver Age Qatar Hall suddenly shared one timeline, and DC struggled to reconcile their histories. In 1989, Hawkworld rebooted Qatar Hall as if he were arriving on Earth for the very first time, directly contradicting decades of Justice League appearances. To explain it away, DC claimed those earlier stories featured an imposter, Fel Andar, posing as Hawkman. This only made things worse, piling new contradictions on top of old ones. Fans were left with multiple Hawkmen whose timelines didn't make sense. By 1994, the confusion forced DC into another reset. Zero Hour merged every Hawk incarnation into a single Hawk God entity, a desperate fix that still failed to satisfy. Years later, Carter Hall was resurrected in JSA, finally restoring clarity. Hawkman's Tangled history became a running joke, proof that DC's post-crisis handling of the character was one of its greatest editorial missteps. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We drop fresh comic breakdowns and updates every single week. Don't miss what's next.